We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk, 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, 1000 KKIM in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and now on the Internet nationwide on knookmedia.com. We are very honored to have as our guest a gentleman we've had on before, the former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, a gentleman that I hope runs for president someday, John Bolton.
The best ambassador we've ever had.
No question about that. Ambassador, welcome back to Taking Care of Business.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words. Thanks for having me back.
Well, we just had Pat O'Donnell on, a combat historian. I think you know some of his work. He's written several books on World War II, and he was actually on the ground and wrote a book about Iraq. And we were trying to get Iraq from his perspective, and we're going to talk to you, and then we've got a gentleman that's a friend of ours who lost his legs in Iraq coming on after you. And you know, for me, I'm looking at this and I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling like I did in 1975 when we lost in Vietnam. What's your perspective on what's happening in Iraq?
Well, I think we're seeing this desperate condition there that is evolving, minute by minute, literally, due almost entirely to the failed policy of the Obama administration. This was always a very hard mission for the United States, but what was keeping Iraq together and what kept the sectarian tensions from boiling over was the presence of American troops. And when the president withdrew our forces, the almost inevitable result is what we're seeing today, because the al-Maliki government came under the influence of Iran. I think that was always there as the prospect. The Sunni Arabs had no intention of being ruled by Persians from across the border. The Kurds had been pulling away from Iraq for 20 years. And it may be that was always going to be impossible to avoid, but it became a near certainty when the president pulled the troops out, because that's the objective he had. He wanted to be able to say he had withdrawn all Americans, and he did not pay the slightest bit of attention to people who were telling him that exactly what we've seen unfold was at risk. So he has basically, through his own policies, undercut everything that we accomplished in the last 10 years. Now, the response of the Obama partisans is to say we never should have gone to war in Iraq to begin with. I think that's a mistake. I think we had to get rid of the Saddam Hussein regime. But in any event, presidents aren't put in office to play out their own ideology. The environment the president found when he took office in 2009 was this very precarious state of play in Iraq. A lot of Americans' interest at stake, and he threw it away. That is it, pure and simple.
Well, it seems that he was interested in a fundamental change in America, and Iraq is just another example of how he's destroying this country.
No, look, I think that's a very important point. I've been saying it now for almost the past 6 years. Our president simply does not give priority to national security. He doesn't care about it, unlike the long line of presidents since Franklin Roosevelt, Republican and Democratic alike. The president doesn't pay the kind of attention to foreign and defense policy that he should. It gets in the way of what his real objective is, and you put your finger on it. He said it in 2008. It's to fundamentally transform the country. So he doesn't want to have to spend time or political resources or effort on things that are unrelated to his priority, and we are paying the price for it now. And I think the price is going to go even higher if the reports that keep coming out that he thinks the answer to the problem in Iraq today is to cooperate with Iran, as he believes the answer to the Iranian nuclear weapons program is to cooperate with Iran. This is simply giving Iraq more power in the region, and it's exactly the opposite of what our policy should be.
And this is just nuts. I mean, cooperating with Iran, it doesn't make any sense at all. The other thing that I'm concerned with is I don't see an anger that there should be about this in the country. Maybe that's partially the media's responsibility to report the story better, but I don't see an anger. Do you? I mean, why isn't it there?
Well, I think people are overwhelmed at this point with with stories about our foreign policy failures, and I think the media certainly are doing everything they can to cover it up and blame it all on Bush. As you know, apparently everything that's happened in the past 5.5 years that's gone bad has to do with the Bush administration, whereas everything that's gone right apparently is due only to President Obama. I honestly think, though, that it is penetrating across the country that we've got a failed presidency on our hands, and it's a failure in domestic terms. This economic recovery is the weakest from a major recession in history, or at least since we've had data to evaluate it. We're in retreat all around the world. You know, by the president's own metric, we are less respected today than when he took office, and you know, we're stuck with this for 2.5 more years. That's why I think the elections this November are so important, because we've got to begin to turn this around and to set the table for the 2016 election. We're going to have a deep hole to dig ourselves out of, and we can only hope it doesn't get any deeper.
Sure. We're having a conversation with former U.S. Ambassador John Bolton.
Ambassador, is there anything that you can name that this president's done that's been successful?
Well, I think the thing he would point to in foreign policy certainly is the killing of Osama bin Laden, and you know, that was a victory. It was a well-deserved end to Osama bin Laden's career in terrorism. But let's be clear, it wasn't because of anything that Barack Obama did. I mean, I know he takes credit for it, and it did occur on his watch, but we had been after bin Laden ever since 9/11, and you know, the most important thing that President Obama did was get out of the way when the time came and the opportunity arose to get bin Laden in Pakistan. But that's not because of what he did. It's like Richard Nixon in the summer of 1969 taking credit for Americans landing on the moon and coming back because he happened to be in office when the Apollo mission landed on the moon. Whereas, in fact, as I think we all know, the program was started 10 years before by President Kennedy, and it reflected a lot of effort over 3 administrations. Just like the killing of Osama bin Laden represented 10 years of effort by our intelligence and military personnel to find him and to get him. It is really, I think, almost unprecedented since the end of World War II to have a president this disengaged. I mean, you look back now in the Jimmy Carter administration, he looks like a tower of strength compared to President Obama.
That's true. You know, and this has been an enlightening week. I mean, all of a sudden we found Ahmed the terrorist, you know, who was responsible for Benghazi.
Purely coincidental, it was this week, of course.
Yeah, and was he the producer of the infamous video? Is that why he was the leader of this whole thing?
Yeah. You know, it's. I think a number of people have pointed this out, and I think they're right on target. That Qatar has been having press interviews almost within weeks after the attack on our consulate in Benghazi. The media could find him; they could have tea with him in cafes in Benghazi, but Obama wouldn't allow our special forces to go in and do what they finally did this past weekend. I think it's incredible that the president's been able to get away with this, but honestly, it's not going to achieve the result I think he wanted, which was to put the Benghazi tragedy behind him. I think it just highlights yet again his misguided understanding of how you fight a war against terrorism. You don't treat Benghazi or other terrorist attacks like it's a robber knocking off the local Starbucks. This is not a criminal law enforcement matter. It is a war, and if we revert to the pre-9/11 paradigm of treating it like law enforcement, we're simply inviting more attacks. And I think this is a critically important philosophical issue, and I think it's something that the American people would understand if we could get a debate going about it.
Every time he messes up, there's always something that comes up, the IRS scandal, NRS, running guns. It doesn't matter what it is. He always comes up with something that takes the media away from the immediate problem.
Well, you know, that's just a coincidence. But, you know, I promised Christine we'd only keep the ambassador for 10 minutes. So, Ambassador, thank you so much for coming on. We would love to have you come back. And, again, I would love to see you as an occupant of the White House someday.
Well, thank you. Very kind to say that. And I appreciate your having me on, and be glad to do it again.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk 1180.